Hey, this is Jordan Chin, and I am the composer and sound designer for Monster Train. I'm going to talk about how I made the sounds for Fel, who is one of the major bosses in our game. Fel has a lot of interesting lore around her character. There's a lot to her story that can be found by playing the game, but the gist of it is that she's caught in a conflict between two major figures in the world, Herzel and Seraph. For the voice of Fel, we worked with the very talented voice actress D.B. Cooper. Early on in development, we decided that none of the Monster Train vocalizations would be actual words, so D.B. was tasked with conveying a lot of complicated emotion just with her intonation and her delivery. So here we are in my project file. After recording with DB, I sifted through her takes and picked out the ones that I felt best fit the character of Fel. Ultimately, we got some very haunting and passionate performances that conveyed pain and a little bit of reluctance. So the first order of business was figuring out a way to add an otherworldly quality to DB's voice. These are angels, and I wanted it to be unique without necessarily losing the passion of the original recording. So I decided to duplicate all of the takes and alter the pitch of the duplicate tracks, then stack them on top of the original. This is a technique I remember hearing in a lot of early anime that would be used to give villains a more monstrous quality. And what we got was this. I felt like this treatment was especially effective on the more musical, sung phrases that we captured. I think it just adds a really unsettling edge to the whole thing. So this is what I used as the foundation for Fel's voice. The next step was to add some effects to make things sound a little bit crazier. So I added a third copy of her voice, pitched way down and spread across the stereo image to add a little bit of low-end width and body, and then applied some phaser, chorus, different creative effects to the whole thing. And lastly, I added a subtle delay and some reverb to make it sound like you were fighting her in a more cavernous space. And I think this also helped to emphasize the size difference between Fel and your creatures. Subtle, but you can hear the delay, the tail at the end of that. Okay. So, at this point, I really didn't want to touch the vocal anymore. I moved on to the next step of our process with the Monster Train creature sounds, which was to add some personal touches to help reinforce the character's visual designs. For Fel, I immediately thought about her large bending wings of light. Unlike Seraph, who has more traditional wings, and Daedalus, who has mechanical ones, there really are no rules about how wings of light should sound. So I kind of treated them like magic spells, almost. There's no real-world equivalent, and I toyed with this idea of getting them to emote almost like the voice was. So for the Spawn and her spellcasting sounds, I layered on some magical synth tones that kind of sounded like beams of light, but with a sort of bending quality to them. For her attacks, I used more of a jet propulsion kind of sound. Much quicker, more straightforward and aggressive, but still kind of magical. And when she's damaged, I went with something that was kind of reminiscent of like a distant gunshot. Sci-fi gunshot, I guess. And finally, on her death, I used a kind of slowly dissipating synth tone, which I thought felt kind of peaceful and final, sort of an emotionally ambiguous end for a character like Fel. So altogether, we ended up with this as Fel's character sound set. There are some great secrets to be found about Fel's role in the story of Monster Train, and we hope that you'll check out the game and find some of them. Thanks for watching.